Dr. Casey Bellarmine is the Chief Financial Officer of CSTEP. He holds a PhD in Industrial Fisheries from the Cochin University of Science and Technology. He has worked in the financial services sector for over 2 decades and has expertise in investment and corporate banking, structured financing, and distressed assets. Dr. Bellarmine joined CSTEP in 2010 and has since not only managed the organization's financial activity but has also been deeply involved in fundraising initiatives. How different are the functions of a finance team in a think tank from a corporate organization?
Now, think tanks are predominantly supported by grants and donations. Now, we know that grants and donations are given as gratis. Now, based on those grants, you build up programs. Now, normally grants are given upfront, but it's not given as a lump sum as the whole kind of project grant. It comes in stages. So there is this possibility that the grants may not, the later installments of the grants may not come. So that is a big risk which the think tanks follow. But I must very clearly mention that normally grants which are committed do come. But that little bit of risk is there. Corporates, on the other hand, what happens? You get a mandate. Now in the mandate there is very clearly defined goals and payment schedules. Now if the payment does not come, it is a legally enforceable contract. You can go to the court. Similarly, think tanks have the benefit in the sense you take the money, you don't deliver, they cannot take you to court, the donor cannot. So the trust between the donor and the institution, the NGO or the think tank is very important. So it's a long-term kind of thing. So what the functional part requires is that you have to build a long-term relationship with the donors, make them comfortable, make them aware of the work you're doing, make them appreciate the work you're doing. Otherwise, the donors will not continue with funding you. So you need to have your relationships made deeper. You have to widen your relationship to include more donors. So that becomes a very healthy kind of situation where you will have a fairly widely broad-based donor base and deep relationships. Now, this brings to the next point, budgeting. How do you budget? That's the most important part. Now, for a think tank, forecasting income is a little tricky because I mentioned about the grant issue. Whereas in your corporate, it's much simpler. It is simpler compared to, because you know you have your manufacturing department telling you that these are going to be my manufacturing targets. Now you can take a fairly reasonable call that okay, based on these manufacturing targets, this should be my income. Now if this income happens, I know what my profit margins are, so I know what's going to be my cash accruals. Here you can predict based on whatever grants you've committed, but something can happen, the grants can get delayed. So budgeting in terms of projecting the income is a challenge. Now on the other side, the expenditure can be fairly straight, predicted much simpler because you know what it is, unless you start getting into the thing. So what we do is that you have to structure your expenses in such a way that move most of the expenditure wherever possible to project related expenditure, so that you can stagger that, you can postpone that to a point where you get the project grants actually received. But still that is a challenge because there are a lot of expenses which are recurring. Again, that has to do with the type of model you operate. Right? In think tank you can have two types of expenditure like models. Like one is the project model where you recruit people based on projects. You have another normal model, non-project model. CSTEP, fortunately or unfortunately, follows the non-project model. So in the non-project model, the thing what we provide to the researchers is that an opportunity to become part of our project. So that is a big challenge for a think tank like CSTEP. Because that means like once I recruit a person, he is a commitment for me for life. Also, then rent, utilities, all those things. Those are also recurring expenditures which are going to hit you every month. So how do you tackle that? So there is definitely a mismatch between your lumpy, unpredictable income. On the other hand, you have a lot of your expenditure is recurring. Now you will try to maximize that, kind of minimize that uncertainty by trying to put maximum amount of expenditure into the project related, which can be matched with the project dependent. So the challenges are quite different if you compare the corporate functions of a CFO or a finance department in a think tank compared to the corporate sector.
In your opinion, how can Indian think tanks balance their income from foreign funding with seeking larger funding from domestic sources?
See, that is a problem which CSTEP as a think tank is today facing. Because if you see, predominantly our income is biased towards foreign money. Although we started off with good amount of contribution from the domestic side, over a period of time it is now flipped. We started with practically zero capital because our founders, our stakeholders, the people who started this, they are not moneyed people, but they came in with tremendous amount of intellectual capital and goodwill. So they were able to initially raise money from the domestic philanthropy because they had big standing. But then what happened? The domestic philanthropy does not clearly understand what is this think tank business. For them, it is just another public good. Now in India, what are the public good? You have challenges in terms of people suffering due to lack of health care, sanitation, primary education. So you are competing like that. So if you go and talk to a domestic philanthropy and tell him that, look, I want to run a program where I'm going to give food, daily meals to the poor people who come to school, immediately he'll write a check. Now you go and tell him, look, I want you to give money for a program where I'll be starting schools for poor children. That interest diminishes a bit. Now next you go and ask him, like, give me money to restructure the primary education in the country. It comes down further. Now you go back. Now where do we operate? Think tanks operate at some much higher level. So it is very difficult to make them understanding. So what is happening is that there is a concept issue. So we have to, think tanks have to do some concept selling. Now there was this big euphoria when the CSR regulation was enacted, that way companies were. But still in a country like India, you have a vast canvas where you can spend this amount of, irrespective of, people said there is going to be 25,000 crores going to come into the additionally. But it can absorb. Maybe the channels are not ready, but the opportunity is there. So there have been, so we are competing in that environment. So how do you make them understand? So thanks to the think tank program, where the TTA program run by IDRC, where CSTEP is a member of that, the domestic philanthropy is slowly started realizing that think tanks can, the proverbial, instead of giving fish, think tanks can teach people how to fish in the long term. So that is catching up. We need to be patient. We need to keep trying. We need to tell them, and then also work out mechanism where they can also see it, because typically the think tank investments return after a very long time. So find out some hybrids where the people who come to contribute, they can see some results immediately. It is a challenge, but it is not